You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming back to Healing Voices Project. I'm Mike Torville, and today I have a guest who I've got to know recently. His name is Andy Campbell. Andy has a story to share, and Andy got my attention, and we corresponded a little bit, and then mentioned his book, which is called Overcoming Life's Toughest Setbacks. But what really got me attention was when Andy and I had what I thought was going to be a 5-minute conversation. It turned into a half-hour conversation, and I could have talked with Andy for hours. And so I said, "Oh, I can't wait to have Andy on." So Andy, thanks for coming on the program today.
Thanks very much, Mike. I really appreciate it. And that feeling was mutual. I think we had to actually consciously decide to cut off our introductory call. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And I wish we could have recorded that call. It would have been a great, great show. Uh, and I mentioned Andy is the author of Overcoming Life's Toughest Setbacks. And he is an author of this book. We didn't set out to be an author, but Andy has a story to share. He has lots of experiences with surviving stage 4 pancreatic cancer, several health setbacks, suicide of his son, among other things that Andy's going to show, and hence why Andy has overcome a lot of challenges that a lot of us, even surviving one of those things, is very difficult. And I gotta say, before we start talking about your experiences, your story, Andy, I have to tell you that I read your book, and here's a picture of it: Overcoming Life's Toughest Challenges, Life's Toughest Setbacks. Um, I thought it was phenomenal. Your
Well,
book
thank
is
you. Thank you.
very well written, understandable, relatable. And I honestly started reading and I said, wow, I can't put this down. And I was telling you earlier, I marked a bunch of pages to talk about and different stories and different aspects. I said, my goodness, this is great. I want to talk about this. And I said, if we do talk about all of these little page markers, we'll be on for 2 hours.
Yeah, we'll be here a while. We'll be here a while.
A
That's
little
great.
while.
That's
So
great. I'm glad you found it interesting, and
it was
I'm glad you
excellent,
found it.
excellent. Very good job on that book, I gotta say. But we want to also share a little bit about you personally, about your story. Obviously, that's what drove you to write your book. And we're going to talk more because you said earlier like, you want to focus on your story. The book is the way of getting out your story
Right.
and getting the messages out there. There's lots of important messages in here. But so let's talk about who Andy Campbell is, and what your experiences are and some of those challenges that you've overcome in your
Yeah.
life.
Andy Campbell is a pretty average person. He grew up came from, I guess people say humble background, but, my grandparents were, I'm 2 generations away from, row crop, share crop farmers in South Alabama who came from very meager existences and, had to, like a lot of people in this country, had to work by the sweat of their brow just to put food on the table. And my parents wanted a better life. They didn't want to have to be poverty stricken for the rest of their life. And so they left that life and started a different life and worked toward having a little better financial background or a little bit better financial prospects, and that led them to work a lot. Basically, and so I grew up kind of alone, and I have an older brother, half brother, and but he's 9 years older than me, and so it was really I grew up on my own a lot, and I think
Mhm.
some of that you kind of learn to kind of take care of yourself, and it was back in a time where that was I don't know if that was all that uncommon or um, maybe it was, I don't know. A lot of my life I never knew was any different than anybody else's, right? I mean, I
But it's
didn't know
all it's
until
what you
later,
knew.
it's what I
It's
knew.
it. That's what you
And
do. Yeah.
yeah, and so, but what it did was it did leave opportunities for other things to occur. And
Mhm.
and so that started out early in life. I was, 6, 7 years old when the first rounds of sexual abuse began, and I didn't really understand what, as you don't at those ages, you don't really understand what that is or how it's going to impact you. But that leads to some other things around self-confidence and self-perception and those things. And then there was a lot of bullying along the way. Actually ended up in the hospital from someone who was, took out some aggression on me when I was about 11 years old. I'd been in some, difficult circumstances. And then my mother ended up with cancer when I was 11 years old, and I watched her struggle against cancer until she died when I was 22, so 11 years. She was
Wow.
42. When
Wow.
she was 42, I was 11, I think, when she was diagnosed. And paradoxically, she's the one who taught me more than anyone else. She taught me about having a love for life, that
Hmm.
there were going to be hard times, there were difficult times, but she showed me how to struggle and strive to stay alive and find, I guess what we would today call resilience, what she just called not giving up,
Yeah.
not quitting. And
Yeah.
then, so life moved along. I got married. Eventually, we had 4 children. And then at 53, I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. We're coming up right now as of this recording on the 7-year anniversary from that diagnosis. So
Wow.
my prognosis at that time was about 6 months, maybe. But I'm still here, and for the last several years, there's no visible sign of disease.
That's
And then,
incredible. So you were
yeah,
diagnosed with stage 4
yeah,
pancreatic cancer
yeah,
at 53 years old.
yeah,
Now thinking you had maybe 6 months to go. That's it.
yeah, yeah. So
You went through treatments.
started
Yeah.
treatments, did a
Yeah.
not quite a year of chemotherapy, but it turns out I did a lot more than I was supposed to. They, at the time there weren't a lot of treatments. I mean, it's 7 years ago. People don't realize. I think a lot of times you don't realize. It's one of the reasons why if you have a very bad disease, okay, this is one of the reasons why you cannot quit, and you have to set very like short-term goals. It's because 7 years, that's like forever in
Mhm.
medical discoveries and medical, and even just our understanding of how to use uh, like homeopathic methods or energy methods like acupuncture and guided imagery and Reiki, and like there's just so many things that we're learning along the way that my goal became, and my physician told me at the time, the physician who really kind of quarterbacked my and still does my journey through
Mm.
this. He said, Andy, the goal is get you to 6 months. We do everything we can so you don't die in 6 months. We get to 6 months, the goal becomes a year. We get to a
Mhm.
year, the goal will become 2 years. 2 years becomes three, three becomes five, five becomes seven, seven becomes two. Like he just kind of had this thing of so all we're ever working to do is to get to the next treatment, right? So,
Mhm.
so if you just like don't try to make a long-term plan, don't try to think about how it's going. You're just working to get to the next treatment because he said things are moving so fast that,
Yeah.
if we can just hang on 6 months at a time. So that became the goal. And then, 2 years into the cancer journey, I found the body of my youngest son after he had taken his own life. And, so there were certainly,
Wow.
yeah, there were the thoughts that come to your mind are things like, so I survived pancreatic cancer to find the body of my youngest son. Like that was the whole point of
How
surviving.
old
And
is your son?
he's 18. He's
He was
18.
18.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to
Yeah.
hear that. You're 2 years into your treatment and you found
Yeah.
that, and at that point well,
Yeah.
all
And,
right.
and in between, in the first 2 years of the treatment, I had two back surgeries in during my first 2 years of treatment. I had just finished my first year of chemo, or right at my first year of chemo, and my daughter had found a trial at the University of Pennsylvania. I couldn't do chemo anymore. It was killing me faster than it was killing the cancer. And I had done a lot of fasting work and I'd done like a 10-day water only fast and then a 5-day water only fast. And I did my last round of chemo and it was bad. And so I decided like that was it. I was done. I was stop. I wasn't going to do chemo. I'd just live out whatever days I had. I'd made it
You
made
weren't giving up. You were just giving up the chemo, but you were
Yeah, I was
just
just
saying,
giving
"Oh,
up the chemo, you know. I mean,
that's it. Okay, yeah,
it was I could not do that treatment, and as far as I knew, there were no other treatments. So I figured I had pushed the treatments had worked well enough. The cancer had been pushed back far enough. I had more time, so I just
hmm
have to see what happened. But in my mind, there wasn't anything else on the horizon, so I was just kind of like, I can't. The chemo is going to kill me dead in my tracks, right? Like they throw a lot at you when you have pancreatic cancer because they don't have a lot
yeah,
of, at the time they didn't have a lot of options. So they just throw this really heavy, it's a 3-day chemo, Mike. You go in on one day, you do like 5 to 7 hours to get the first two chemo drugs in you because they got to put all the stuff around it. You know, they got to give you antihistamines, they got to give you all this other stuff so you don't have a terrible reaction to it. And then they got to give you all the glucose yeah, it's like a lot of stuff that has to go in. And then the third one is toxic enough where it takes 42 hours to go in. So they can't put it all in at one time like they can the other drugs. They have to drip it in through a pump. Every 3 minutes, it puts in just a little bit of
yeah.
the chemo. They send you home with this is funny. The first day when they sent me home for the first time with the pump, they handed me this hazmat bag. And they said, you got to take this with you. And I said, why do I need a hazmat bag? And they said, well, in the unlikely event, it's unlikely, it's always unlikely. In the unlikely event that that your IV pops out of your port, because I have a port in my chest, you know, where they plug in and um, and then or the hose were to come loose from the pump,
hmm
and any of this chemo spills out, you immediately take the pump and put it in this bag, and then you got to call the fire department right away. In our area,
Wow.
it's the fire department that does the hazmat stuff. And so I was like, so wait, why do I got to call the fire department? And they said, well, it's super toxic. Okay, like you can't, like, don't get it on your hands. Like, if you can't put it in the bag without getting it on your hands, don't touch it. Just leave it there. And the hazmat team will put it in the hazmat bag. And I said, guys, I gotta ask one last question. If it spills out of me, I call the hazmat team. They said, yeah. But if it's in me, I don't call the hazmat team. And they're like, right. And I was like,
Yeah,
no,
right.
not right. Like, this doesn't, I'm not certain that we're like, is this safe? And they were like, absolutely not safe, not safe. You know, but we'll do it as long as you can because that's all we got.
But you're filling me up with this
You're
anyways. Yeah,
filling me up
okay.
with it anyway. Yeah, so it's like a a 3-day chemo, and I just decided like the symptoms. I mean the allergic reaction had just gotten really really bad. And so I decided, like, I got to stop chemo. It actually is that event is the reason. One of my core beliefs is there are no hard decisions, only hard consequences. And it came out of that experience of deciding
hmm
to stop chemotherapy. And I didn't know why I was stopping chemotherapy. I just knew that there was a loud voice that was telling me all the fearful reasons not to. And I
hmm
wanted to keep going. Like I wanted to live. Uh, but there was this really soft voice, like quiet voice in my head that was saying, you have to stop the chemotherapy. It's time to stop the chemotherapy. And then there was this loud voice that was telling me all the fearful reasons why I couldn't do that. And so 6 months after I stopped the chemotherapy, well, 90 days after I stopped the chemotherapy, I tried one last round and I couldn't do it. Well, I did it, but I couldn't do it again. And in that 90-day window, my oldest daughter, who's now a physician herself, found the found a trial at the University of Pennsylvania that was specifically designed for people who had had a good response from chemotherapy but couldn't do it anymore, had the genetic mutation I had, um, like they had like 5 or 6 I met all the qualifiers. And they weren't going to take me in. The first people that my wife talked to weren't going to take me in the trial, but then my wife talked to some other people, and anyway, I ended up in the trial. So between my oldest daughter finding it, and my wife being persistent and getting me into it, I ended up in a trial, and I'm still here today. There were some rough days in the trial. The trial almost killed me, but I'm still here. Still here, Mike.
You're still here. It didn't kill you.
It didn't.
It
I remember
didn't.
there's an immunotherapy, just another kind of, some of these things you got to find humor in. Okay, like you got to. So I go, and they're going to do the trial, and so the trial was you do this immunotherapy. They start you on this drug that's designed for the genetic mutation I have, and then at the same time they start you on this immunotherapy. There were two arms to the trial, two different immunotherapies, same drug, same pill drug, but two different immunotherapies. And so one of them you went on like just as long as you could do it. Like, eventually
Hmm.
some people have like reactions to it, and so it starts attacking their organs, so they have to stop.
Okay.
But it's every 2 weeks, and it was just like as long as you go. As long as you can do it, you do it. And the other one was you go up every 3 weeks, which was good for me because I had to fly to Philadelphia every 3 weeks to do this. And so I was like, well, I don't know if I have to fly every 2 weeks. That's expensive. So they were like, well, we're going to put you in an arm that's every 3 weeks. I said, that's awesome. And they said, yeah, you only got to do it 4 rounds. And I said, that's great. Like 4 rounds. That's awesome. Because like yeah, the
Hmm.
other one was like ad
Like I
infinitum.
can take that. Yeah,
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 four
yeah.
rounds. And I said, but I'm kind of curious, like, why do they get to keep doing it? And I'm only going to do 4 rounds. And they said, well, at the end of 4 rounds, we lose people in the trial. And I said, you mean like they get better? Like they just like you don't know where they are? Like they just get that much better? Like they just leave? And he's like, no, no, we know where they are. But
Yeah,
they're not in the trial anymore. And I was like, wait a second, this sounds like that other drug they gave me the hazmat bag for. And he's like,
yeah.
yeah. And so I did 3 rounds of it. It was going fantastic. I never felt better. I felt like a 20-year-old. I mean, the immune system
Felt
is
like
just,
you have not felt in many years then,
oh, I
right?
mean,
Yeah.
it was amazing. Like your immune system jacked up, and especially after the chemo, I was like, man, this is awesome. And then just before I went for my fourth trial, I thought I got what it was, a stomach bug. And, but I went up and I told him, I said, oh no, I just had like a little upset stomach a little bit. And they asked me a bunch of questions and they touched my stomach and, because they press on your organs every time. They check your lungs, your heart, your intestines, because that's usually where immunotherapies attack. And everything seemed good. And so 3 weeks later, so I went ahead and did that round. And 3 weeks later, I went back for my checkup and I said, man, my stomach is just like it's really gotten worse. And so I laid down on they had me lay down on the exam table. And I remember the PA was there, and so she touched my abdomen. Now I'm about 6'1". At that time, it was 250 pounds. And she just touched my abdomen. And I swear to you, Mike, the next thing I knew, I was standing on my feet. Like I don't really know how I got up because I didn't roll over. I just like popped up off and landed on my feet. And I said, I don't know what you touched, but don't ever touch that again.
Wow.
And she was like, I'll be back in a minute. I need to go see the doctor. So they brought the oncologist. My oncologist came in. She's like, um, it's starting to attack your intestines. Like we gotta. So they don't want to turn it off. So they don't want to like fill you full of steroids to stop it, but they can't. They can't let it go because if it gets out of control, it'll kill you. And
Yeah.
so that turned into 4 months, almost five, but 4 months of. Well, let me put it like this. I went to the bathroom 15 to 20 times a day. And I was on high doses of oral steroids. So it was 2 or 3 times where like they kept asking me because I go back every 3 weeks and they kept saying, like, how bad is it? Because, we might have to just put you in and just start IV and steroids into you because if we can't get it under control, then it'll kill you. So we got to stop. We got to do what we got to. So it was always like this balance of like how much steroid do we give him? Because you don't want to turn off the immune system, but you don't want it to kill him. And so they're balancing it. So I did oral high dose steroids for 4 months. And and about 4 months, thank God like I worked my way through it. And the steroids kind of kept it under control. And I guess my immune system figured out to stop attacking my intestines. And by 5 months, I was pretty much back to normal. But for 4 months, I was in the bathroom 15 to 20 times a day.
You must have lost a lot of weight too.
You know what? I can't remember. I think I probably lost 15 pounds or something like that,
Okay.
15, 20 pounds.
Well,
Not, I didn't look, I've never really been able to lose weight. I went into chemo at 250. I came out at 251.
oh, wow.
I don't know what happened. Like
Yeah.
the only way I could not I did have to take from time I did take nausea medication, but to keep from getting nauseous, I had to eat. It was like this paradoxical thing. So my wife, every time I went to chemo, she had to bring me either a Chick-fil-A sandwich and fries, and yeah, and I can't remember. I had
Yeah.
like a Sprite. I think I could drink Sprite
Okay.
or 7 Up, or she would bring me a Big Mac, and I had to have that. Like she had to have that in the car when she picked me up from chemo. And as long as and I had to eat it slow, but as long as I got that on my stomach, I could it was, and the doctors kept saying, you're eating? And I was like, if I don't, I throw up.
Yeah,
Eh,
most people are super nauseous and they'll just throw
yeah,
up and not want to eat anything. So
yeah,
you went through this. So all these months, but you said during this you also had a few back surgeries.
yeah, yeah. I had
How'd you
two
squeeze
vaccines.
that in?
It was the first one was just before I started the immunotherapy. Well, it was right when I started the immunotherapy. I was going up. See, is that right? Was that? No, I think the first one was the year. Yeah, it was I started the immunotherapy and but I was doing better, but I blew a disc in my back, a disc ruptured, and I wasn't doing much at all. I just lifted some little 20-pound thing. I didn't even bend
Yeah,
over, but I just lifted it with my arms up. Like,
your body was probably a little weak from,
oh,
treatment and go there. Yeah.
yeah, I was
So
beat down pretty hard, and
I can say,
but but the disc ruptured, and so I ended up. It's just one of those things. I don't really know. You just get in this mindset. I just had this thing where, like, for better or worse, uh, when I know I'm going to have to face something, I just kind of put my head down and close my eyes and just drive forward. It's like I'll feel everything, I'll worry about everything on the other side. But,
mhm.
like you just got to get through it. And so I mean, it was bad. Like I couldn't walk. It was pretty painful. But I had to go to UPenn. Like I couldn't not be in the trial. Like I was just starting the trial. I couldn't not go. So we worked it out. Luckily, it ruptured just after I came back from UPenn. And so we were able to get to a surgeon. He did what he had to do. And when we explained the situation to him with the cancer trial and being pancreatic cancer, and I was still alive, a year later, he was like, okay, let's keep you in the trial. Let's get you. So they did it. I had all of that done in 2 weeks. I had about 4 days, 3 or 4 days for recovery. And then I was back on a plane up to UPenn. And
Mm,
luckily, it was kind of one of those minimally invasive, one of the new back surgeries. So, and then a year later, another one popped. And so the
yeah.
same thing happened. I did it in between and then,
And
back
going
on a
through
plane.
that, your body's drained, you're in recovery for the surgeries, you're doing all this stuff, and that's around that time is when you found your son.
A little bit after that, yeah. All that happened in the first 2 years. And then it was probably 2.5 years into it. So I was coming up on like my third anniversary from the diagnosis. That would be
Mm.
in August. And he took his own life at the beginning of June. Yeah.
I'm very sorry. That's I've had several friends and family members
Yeah.
gone through that, and that's probably the hardest thing you've had to overcome.
I think of all the things, um, I don't know that there's anything that can compare with that. I don't
Right?
think there is. It's because the devastation that it leaves for not just yourself, but for my wife, his mother, and
Yeah.
his three siblings and people who knew him, and it's just, yeah, it's just, uh, I, I could, I have, I attempted once to think of an enemy, even some, like someone I've never met, just like a world enemy in history,
Hmm. Hmm.
that I would wish that on. I couldn't come up with one. I couldn't come up with one. And I'm sure, and there's a lot of people that I know that are bad people in history, okay? Like they're bad people. But I couldn't come up with one that I would say, there's got to be another way to deal with that person. I don't think it's fair to do that. Uh, it's a it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing that just continues every single day.
It
That-
does.
yeah.
It really does.
Um,
I saw a thing one time that, this is helpful, and maybe for some, it was helpful to me. and maybe
Mm,
for some of your listeners, it'll be helpful to them. I saw this picture. This was early on. It was like a visual that somebody had created, and on one side of the visual, there was this picture frame, and it was, it was like, say, I don't know, like a 6 by 9, 9 by 6, but it was like a smaller, and it was completely black on the inside, like the picture was black, and it represented like your heart, the hole in your heart after a loss.
mm,
And so it was 100% of the picture frame. It was 100%. And then to the right of that was a visual with a much larger picture frame. And the size of the black area, the hole in your heart, was exactly the same. It was 6 by 9, same size as it was on the left. But on the right, the picture frame had been filled with more of your life. And so, like, what it was working to communicate was, unlike what people say, time does not heal all wounds. That wound will always be there, and it will be no smaller than what it is.
mm,
The objective is to persevere and live more life, and to live life, kind of moving forward, not stuck in that moment. I don't want to be stuck back there with him in the moment he made that decision. I'd rather bring him with me as we go forward. And because otherwise, I won't have a picture, my life won't be big enough where that becomes 15% or 10% of my life. Like the picture stays, like the thing is
it's
still
always
six by
there.
nine. It's the same
Right,
size, but it becomes
right,
a smaller percentage of your whole life.
right.
And that helped me a lot because I don't want
I
to
think that's
leave
a
him
very
behind,
simple,
you know?
it's such a simple way to convey that. And
Yeah.
it's really pretty profound. But I think what you're saying, you owe it, not just to yourself, you owe it to other people in your life, your family, your
Yeah,
other children, to do that, to live for them.
you do. And I think
Yeah.
I heard this not too long ago, and I'm kind of a- adopting it and then changing a little bit. But basically, it was about, we have to be careful in life when events take place to not let our spirits remain in that event while our body moves forward through time. And I thought that, like that represented to me a goal, which I think is kind of, part of being resilient is you can bring with you the things like I'd never want to leave my son behind. And there's always a struggle, I think, certainly for me. And I've heard other people say that when you have a loss, it's sometimes it's difficult to move forward because you don't want to feel like you left that person behind.
Mm,
And I think what we decided to do was to not stay with him in that moment, but to bring him with us as
mhm,
we, move forward. So, because I don't think it's the best thing when we have a loss, to let our spirit stay in that event too long because time keeps moving, the universe keeps rolling. And so you're going to move forward in time. Like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like next month's
Whether
going
you
to
like it or
happen,
not.
whether you
Wh-
like it
wh-
or not.
yeah.
So now it's just a matter of does your spirit come with you or do you just walk through kind of soulless?
I think Andy, that helps me too, thinking about certain people. That just that whole perspective is already shifting my thinking about that. So that's very helpful. I think that's one example. Well, I guess I'm getting ahead, but through all of this, through all that you've dealt with, and I know like you said, you wouldn't wish it on the worst enemy, and I agree with you. But how did you? At what point did you say, all right, God, this is just too much, and I'm going to get through it? But then at what point did you say, you know what, I want to share my story and write your book? What prompted all of that?
So this, so this is kind
Mhm.
of a backwards way of getting there. I never wanted to.
Yeah.
One of my physicians and a couple other people kept saying, you survived pancreatic cancer. You need to write a book about what all you did because I kind of have a fairly defined strategy for how that developed over a period of time in conjunction with my primary physician, kind of how I would approach, uh, the struggle against cancer. It was a three-pronged, and it still is kind of a three-pronged attack. One of it was how
Mhm.
much make sure that I could get enough energy, my body had enough energy to sustain the struggle. How could I cut off the food supply, the energy supply to the cancer, so it would be less likely to, it would have less energy to replicate. And then what could I do to weaken the cancer cells so the therapy could be more effective? Like that was my three-pronged strategy. Um,
Hmm.
and I do a lot of stuff. Like I take probably 40 to 50 pills, capsules every day, of on-label meds, off-label meds, trial meds, supplements, all kinds of stuff, but they're all kind of designed around those three prongs of that strategy. And so they would say, you should write a book about that. And I was like, I don't write a book about cancer. Like that just seems, first of all, you never know. Cancer is kind of individualized. I don't know, like if what I do, somebody else, it worked for somebody else.
You're right.
And
Good
they
point.
and they were
Yeah.
like, yeah, but just generally speaking, you could talk about kind of like your approach to it. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And then um, the company I was working for, this a year or so ago, 18 months ago, was going through, like a lot of tech companies, going through a series of layoffs at the time.
Hmm.
And I'd had to do like four rounds of layoffs, people on my team, people that reported to me and people that reported to them. And and one day I realized that I was thinking, I had this thought. I was like, I don't even know if I want to work here because it feels like this company is like making bad decisions and it's committing suicide, you know.
Hmm.
Now, first of all, what I want to say is I love the company I work for. They've been just wonderful to me, and it is a wonderful company. What I realized in that moment was that the loss of my son, the cancer, like everything had rolled up onto me, that I was drawing these illogical comparisons. A company does what it has to do to survive, not terminates. It's doing what it has to do to survive and,
Hmm.
prosper for its shareholders and take care of its employees. It's doing the best it can. But I was associating it and I thought, man, if you're associating like the death of your son to how a company, you know, does its business, like you might be the problem. Like you need to seek some help. And I mean, I'd done a lot of therapy. I'd done EMDR. I'd done and I highly recommend EMDR for people who've gone through it.
Just to drive, we just did our two previous segments were about EMDR.
Oh, I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, you'll have to watch, but just two previous episodes.
Yeah, I will
Recently, we
definitely.
just talked about EMDR, and it took two episodes
Yeah,
because there was so
yeah.
much to it.
Did
Yeah,
they, I gotta, can we just kind of ship? I got a question for
yeah,
you. So,
sure.
um, did they talk about, and I am going to go listen to those episodes. Did they talk about the impact to forgiveness of EMDR?
No,
So I got to tell you, just for your listeners, okay?
yeah,
One of the
yeah.
things I noticed after I went through EMDR, before I went through EMDR, like you have sexual abuse, you have all these different things that happen to you, and people tell you that you need to forgive people, but over a lifetime of difficult circumstances, you can build up resentment and anger toward people and all, and and so I would try to forgive people, like I really would put an effort into forgiving people, but it never felt like it was complete, like I'd let go. And one of the things I realized after I did EMDR, because, I'm sure they talked about like it separates the emotion of the past trauma from the memory. So you can think about the memory without, having such a visceral emotional reaction to it,
The
right?
emotions, yeah.
And what I realized afterwards was when I didn't have the emotion attached to the memory, I could truly forgive someone because every time I thought about that event, I didn't carry that emotion with it. And it was the emotion tied to the event that was preventing me from really reaching a level of forgiveness for the people who, in my opinion, had wronged me. And it was a profound thing for me, like a benefit of EMDR that no one had ever talked to me about.
Hmm.
But it was like the emotion. If every time I think about something, I have this emotional reaction to it, this physical reaction to the emotion, it's really hard to ever get to the forgiveness part. Like you try, but you can't get there. So I didn't know if they talked about that.
Well, and not too much, but even forgiving yourself for things. I think that's
Hmm.
important, not just others, but yourself for many things,
Yeah.
because that burden is a bit heavy and restrictive in
Oh,
how you
terrible,
think.
terrible.
Uh,
But I got off
um,
topic.
well,
So
no,
I
that's
did,
okay. I think I veered you off a little bit. I steered you off the
well, no,
road.
so I
But,
did, so I
you know,
did the
yeah,
EMDR and,
yeah.
but I decided at that point, I was like, I got to do something different because this is not, and I think that's another thing, I would share with listeners like that. I do believe that if you get quiet, there is that still small voice that will speak to you, right? There is that, in my belief system, it's God that talks to you, and other people's belief system, it's whoever, right? The universe,
Yeah.
whatever. But
Mhm.
but it will speak to you, and I just felt like it's like you need to do this. You need to keep pursuing it. So what I did was I took a leave of absence from work because it is a quick company and they had a leave of absence program that I could take advantage of. So I did. And it was during like dealing with all of that toward about toward the end of that leave of absence, about 3 months, a little bit more than 3 months, I got bored. And so one day I was sitting at my desk in my home office, and I didn't really have anything to do. I didn't go back to
Mhm.
work yet, you know. And so I looked down and I had my little list of my core beliefs because I always keep it with me. And and I thought, wow, I don't want to write a book about cancer or childhood sexual abuse or the suicide, my son's suicide. But I could probably I could write down a few notes about how these core beliefs have kind of helped me with these things. And so I just started writing like on a pad, just started writing some notes. And I'm not a very good writer. But I
Well,
just
I'm gonna
started.
tell you that the book is very well written, so I
Well,
give
I
you that.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. I will say I did test the limits of my editor. Okay. I did test her limits, both in content and in grammatical errors.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was, I just started writing it down, and then one thing kind of led to another, and then I kept doing, and so I ended up with the book. But it wasn't really, I didn't really start out to write a book. I started out to deal with why was I thinking this way. And then during that process, I just ended up with like enough time that I was like, wow, I need to do something for a few weeks. I
Did
got
you find that one thing it evolved, obviously, but one thing led to the other, and then you finally, oh no, this, and then it just snowballed into something more than you expected?
way more, because I mean, well, I didn't really think about, I didn't think about, like, I never thought about, like, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what I was doing. So I don't know. I just kind of got this idea of like, just at least if you were going to write something, write a sentence or two about each one. And then,
Uh,
I'd write a sentence or two, and then well, that wouldn't really explain it. So I'd have to write a little bit more about it.
yeah.
And then I move on to the next one and I'd write a little bit more about it. And then the next I go back and read it. And it's like, well, those four sentences, that paragraph doesn't really make sense. Like you got to put a little more around
I
that,
do the same
And,
thing. I get it.
yeah. And then the next thing
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then I sent it off to an editor and I was like, what do she gave me a quote. This another one of my favorite stories. She gives me a quote. And so I send it, she goes, well, for this many words, for that many things, about this much. I said, okay. So I sent it to her. And then she sent it back and she said, I've read your manuscript. And I said, yeah, what do you think? She goes, I got to send you a new quote. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, that good, huh? And she's like, we're going to need to work a little bit. We're going to spend some time together. And, but I never
Yeah.
expect, so I was like, well, I had learned through the last few experiences, the cancer and my son's passing, that because of my early life, I spent a lot of time controlling things, right? You control to manage risk. You don't want bad things to happen. I really, and all the way through up until I had pancreatic cancer, I really focused on how do I minimize risk and how do I keep bad things from happening. And when the cancer happened and then my son's passing, I realized that all that had just been illusion. I'd never really been keeping bad things from happening, because there was just all of a sudden it was too big. Like like pancreatic cancer is just too big. I don't know what to do about that. Like
That can be very stressful to take that on.
yeah, yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
I remember I tell you, man, one of the most emotional things that ever happened to me, in a positive way. I was at the University of Pennsylvania. I have a wonderful physician there. She's just wonderful, just a good human being, right? And in addition to being a super intelligent physician. But I was really struggling, and I'm trying to, I'm like watching the numbers, because I have to have blood work every 3 weeks, and I'm looking at the scans, and I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm trying to figure, and when you're in a trial, man, they're taking like this, a lot of blood out of you, like they're watching everything. And I'm trying to figure out what all it means. I'm studying to figure out what all the numbers are. And and she asked me one time, she said, what's wrong? Like, like I was just down one visit. And I said, well, I'm just exhausted, honestly. Like I feel like I can't see the bad thing coming, like it's just too much.
Hmm.
And she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, in my mind, because Mike, like I guess this happens to other people, but for me, like when you speak, I don't hear words, I see pictures. I kind of hear pictures, right? So everything's like a bit like, you'll see me kind of look away a little bit or look,
The
it's like
images just,
an image is
yeah,
forming in my
yeah,
mind,
yeah,
so
yeah,
I don't,
yeah.
um, and, uh, and I said, well, it's like I'm in the desert and I'm in this, I want to say castle, but I'm in like this fort and it's just me. And I'm roaming around the towers, just looking out to see what thing is coming. The cancer is out there and it's coming from some direction. And but it's dark and I can't see. And I'm just exhausted. And she said, still makes me emotional at the moment because I was really struggling. And she said, I tell you what, how about you go sit down and take a nap
Hmm.
and let me be on the lookout. One, I know what I'm looking for, and you don't. Two, you can trust me. I'll tell you if there's something wrong. Three, if I don't tell you something's wrong, go on about your life. And, in that moment, when it's life or death,
Yeah.
um, and it's good to have somebody who'll come in and just say, so I had to learn that I couldn't control things, right? I couldn't control things. And I think that was one of the real important lessons in dealing with all of these things is that the view of control is really just an illusion.
And the release and unburdening yourself from that
Yeah,
is pretty
yeah,
massive, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it is. Yeah, and it was somebody that I trusted. Like she's like, no, I know she knows what she's doing.
Well, it just
But
seems to have put it so simply that you
yeah,
almost okay,
yeah,
right?
it was like,
Yeah.
well, really, can I?
Wow.
And she's like, yeah, I got this. Like she's like, I have a team of people, and besides, I know what I'm looking for. You don't even know what you're
Mhm.
looking for, so why don't you just
In
leave
other
all
words,
the? I'll be the
what good
lookout.
is the stress you're carrying? It
Yeah.
does you no good at all. Yeah.
None,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so yeah, that was one of the things that I had to learn through this. And I was telling you that for a reason, and now I can't remember what the reason was.
Well, I will tell you, and there's a lot to it. And believe me, I said earlier, I think we could just talk like we did before for hours, and we're getting a little close to the time.
Yeah,
Um, I will tell you, there's a lot that stuck out here. A lot, Andy, that did stick out in the book, and I think it's phenomenal. You said also something before we got on, and what your hopes are with the book and being on a show like this about helping people, and what hopefully a listener a takeaway from the book. What is your hopes right now through sharing your message?
my hope is that someone who is considering giving up or giving in will hear an honest, transparent story about surviving through a number of things, and that and I mean like a kind of a raw story, the good and the bad, right? It's not just surviving cancer, it's all the bad stuff that happened in between. And so my goal is to share with people who are struggling and to say to them, do not give up, do not give in. Set your goals maybe just for today. Just get through today. And maybe there's something that you can take from these core beliefs that I've kind of assembled over the decades that have helped me that might help you. And, because my goal is to help people not give up. Because I believe there's a lot more of us that can survive if we just don't give up. And I've had a number of situations where I was on the verge of giving up, and
Yeah.
someone came along and encouraged me and it kept me going, a little bit further until the next person came along and encouraged me. And so that's what I hope to do for someone else.
Have you received from some feedback from people who have read the book?
I have, and it seems to be it, that goal seems to be occurring, you know.
Yeah.
And I just assume though, I go into it with the assumption that I will really never know. I mean, we do a podcast. I mean, somebody may listen to this 3 years from now, So I don't know. Maybe I'm doing this for the person 3 years from now who's going to listen and they need it then, So I feel like it's the right thing to share it and to be transparent. And then I'll leave it up to the creator to figure out where all it goes or what happens with it.
Well, I commend you because I know it was a lot. You've gone through a lot. You took some time to write the book. And there's a few chapters that stuck out. We won't get into them. We might have another conversation. I think we might have to do that. Um, But when you talked about like one of the chapters, for example, is harnessing the power of mindset. We've heard about mindset, but what I really appreciate about this book, a very simple message and that's relatable. It's not a bunch of psych talk. It zeroes in quite well,
Yeah.
and then embracing change and adaptability. And I think what you've gone through certainly kind of encompasses change, adaptability, and when you talk about control a lot and learning what you can't control and the recognition of that is really important. But it's a wonderful, and it's not just it's your core beliefs that you live, but it's a guide. It's almost like strategies that are well written and easy to say, yeah, okay, I get this, I understand this, yeah, I can apply this, right? Because it's written in that way, and I really enjoyed it, I gotta say. But there's a lot in here, and again, it's called Overcoming Life's Toughest Setbacks. Andy, do you have a website at all if people want to know more?
Yeah. Easiest way to find me is to just go to askandycampbell.com. Uh,
AskAndyCampbell.com.
yeah. It kind of came around because people would say, "How are you still alive?" And they would ask the doctor, well, then they're like, "Well, ask Andy." And so people did. And so I was like, "Well, that sounds like an easy to remember name." So that was the name of the website.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, I wish we had more time, but I do. And obviously invite you back anytime because I think there's always more to dive in here. And I think this can be applied to people. I mean, we talk about addiction a lot, we talk about mental health a lot, we talk about depression and different ways. We talked about EMDR and how that can be effective. Having actually somebody who's into hypnosis in a
Oh,
few
yeah.
weeks.
I've
We're going to
done
talk
that,
about
by the
that
way.
too.
I've done guided
Yeah.
imagery, I've done hypnotherapy, I've done EMDR. And I think there's places for all of it, Mike. There's places for
Yeah.
all of it. I believe in a
Yeah.
big toolkit.
And one thing you probably know, because the treatments, like you said with cancer, is you said earlier that it's very personal and it's very hard to talk
Yeah.
about cancer because it's personal for everybody. It's the same way with treatment for addiction. It's personal, and not every path works the same way, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, and
so yeah,
sometimes it's a
yeah,
combination of paths, it's a
yeah,
combination of things. And what I encourage people to do, what one of my core beliefs is being insatiably curious. Don't, take the time, find a way to put the combination together for you. Like what works for
it's
everybody else. I mean, it work, but you can take a piece of a lot of different things and kind of put together your plan.
That's a great thing. Find a way to make the combination work for you because
Yeah.
there's parts of the recipe there, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
that make it all work. And the other thing too is I find besides just what and how, it's the people behind it. You find sometimes it's rolling along, and I've had many people say everything was rolling along until I met so and so, and she or he had a great impact, and
Oh, yeah.
everything turned around because somehow that connection with that one person makes all the difference in the world,
It does.
right?
It does.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody that I realized when my son's passing, and I think this is true for, like addiction. Like I can understand uh, that someone is addicted to a substance, whatever that substance is. Like I've had a lot of needles poked in me. Okay. Like I've had
Yeah.
a lot of
I
blood
bet.
work done. I've had a lot of needles. I understand that a heroin addict would, insert a needle into their arm. I understand that. I cannot comprehend the power of that substance to drive that act, right? Like I was driven to do it because I wanted to stay alive. Like,
Mhm.
so I think like there's things that we can't, you need that person that comes along that comprehends what you're going through. They
Yeah.
don't just
Yeah.
understand it. Like they speak to you at a level that's just a level deeper or higher, whichever way it works. But like they speak to you and you're just like, that person knows, like I can trust that person. And then when they tell you you can make it, you're like, oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna make it, you know?
It's the way it happens.
Yeah.
It's exactly the way it happens. Well, I guess we are running out of time.
Yeah, we're
um,
we're over. Yeah.
yeah, we are, but that's okay. I always appreciate talking with you, Andy. And again, it's overcoming life's toughest setbacks. Andy has a story. Visit his website, askandycampbell.com. And Andy, I would like to, because I think again we could talk of any number of topics, but I'd love to have you back again. And
I'd love to be here, man. We can
all
dig
right,
into those things, and we kind of
absolutely.
got back, we kind of got past some stuff. Now we can dig into the meat of the
Yeah,
subject.
it
Yeah,
gave you several ideas too in our
yeah. There you
conversation.
go. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, and thanks listening, everybody joining us. We'll see you all soon. And thanks, Andy. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
All right. Sure. Talk to you soon.